So, over the past 48 hours or so, there has been a discussion that has been warring on social media involving the Nintendo Switch 2 versus the PlayStation 5. And essentially, we have individuals out there saying the Nintendo Switch 2 is pretty much a PlayStation 5 at this point in time. Now, if these were children, if these were people that were not working, you pretty much rely on your parents for something, and your parents buy you a console for the holiday season or maybe your birthday or something. So you have to make a decision. You have to pick, which console do I want? Which one interests me the most? I could understand that. That's how a lot of the 90s console warring was. You had to pick between a Sega Genesis or a Super Nintendo, and I, of course, picked the superior one, the Sega Genesis. But as time goes on and you become an adult, you start to work. You start to make your own money. You start to have purchasing power and a choice in what you decide to purchase. So if you like certain aspects of one console, you can buy that. Or if you want to have all the consoles, you could buy that as well. So console warring as an adult really doesn't make any sense. And that's kind of how I'm feeling about this whole conversation about the Nintendo Switch 2 versus the PlayStation 5, because honestly, it's already gone off the rails. I think this whole thing is absolutely ridiculous, and somebody needs to step in and be a voice of reason. Somebody needs to step in and be like, hey, why don't we all just kind of be quiet and just enjoy the games? Now, I'm not a stranger to comparing footage from one console to another console. I actually made a video showcasing some Nintendo Switch 2 games that are also available on other platforms such as the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, and we got some pretty comparable results based on the trailers that had released. Comparable, not exact, not the same sort of resolution and frame rate and stuff like that, but definitely closing the gap between something like a Nintendo Switch and a PlayStation 5, or really by extension a Nintendo Switch and a PlayStation 4 Pro or an Xbox One S. It was definitely very eye-opening to see just how capable the Nintendo Switch 2 was versus really the Nintendo Switch 1, because that should be where most of the comparisons are coming from. How much of an upgrade over the original system is our brand new system? But I've seen over the weekend that people have just been like jumping out of the window with this, like, oh, the Switch 2 is basically just a PlayStation 5 now, so it's the best thing ever, and it's because of these reasons. Now, a lot of this is stemming from new footage of Cyberpunk 2077. A 37 or so minute video went up showcasing Cyberpunk 2077 running on the Nintendo Switch 2, and I honestly think the footage looks very good. Somebody else went ahead and made a comparison of the same areas and the same environments that were shown in this footage versus how it looks on the Steam Deck. And the Nintendo Switch 2 definitely is more capable than the Steam Deck when it comes to this game. There's much more visual clarity, there's much more visual density, and most importantly, there's much more environmental sort of things happening that are not prevalent in the Steam Deck version of the game. So yes, Steam Deck versus Switch 2. I think the Switch 2 will do this game much better. But then it comes down to the PlayStation 5, and people are now saying, oh, well, look at this footage. It's just as good as the PlayStation 5, and I don't really like that. I think you could say it's comparable because it definitely is comparable, and that's what people should be looking at, a hybrid system that you can play on your television or play in your hands portably to be comparable to a PlayStation 5 version of the game. But to sit there and just lie to people, because, these Nintendo guys, they love to tell you about misinformation and how misinformation is so bad. But when they do misinformation, when they say things that are factually incorrect, and then they don't question anything, they don't apologize, they don't adjust what they are saying, you are just as guilty as what you are accusing other people of. Because realistically speaking, while Cyberpunk 2077 does look great on the Nintendo Switch 2, it does not hit the same target frame rates or target resolutions that the PlayStation 5 or PlayStation 5 Pro versions hit. There is less frame rate and there is less 1080p, so your resolution is lower. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily the end of the world or anything like that, but when you're looking through this 37 plus minute footage of Cyberpunk 2077, you can clearly see, especially in combat situations, that yes, there are some stutters from time to time and there are some frame rate drops from time to time. Does it make the game bad? No, the game is, I mean, kind of bad on its own, but that's really a topic for another day. Just how Nintendo fans all of a sudden are huge Cyberpunk 2077 fanboys, even though when the game first came out, nobody liked it. But, you know, I digress. That's not what we're here to talk about with the quality of the game. It's more so the visual representation. And these frame rate drops, these sort of little hiccups that happen on the Switch 2 version don't necessarily happen on the PlayStation 5 version. So to sit there and say, oh, it's the same thing, like, that's just wrong. People are out there saying, oh, the Switch 2 version runs at 4K for Cyberpunk 2077 when in docked mode. And that is also wrong. We know that it runs at 1080p. Now, yes, it will display on your 4K television, but I can make a Nintendo 64 display on a 4K television. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is running at 4K. But people just run with this stuff. They want to get their little likes, their retweets, their sort of information out there, and it just makes a lot of Nintendo related content creators, I think, look bad. And I know I get lumped into there sometimes because I do talk a lot about Nintendo, but I enjoy talking about Nintendo because I think they're just a fascinating company, whether for better or worse. But this whole situation is just making a bunch of people look really foolish and really silly and really showing the console fanboy era of themselves as an adult. Like, I don't think anyone expects every Nintendo Switch 2 game that also comes out on something like the PlayStation 5 to look exactly and run exactly how it does on the PlayStation 5. That's really not feasible for this situation because the PlayStation 5 is a dedicated home console and the Nintendo Switch 2 is a hybrid console, meaning that you can play it docked or you can play it on the go. That's kind of the whole appeal. Now, Nintendo does have technology within the Nintendo Switch 2 to definitely sort of lessen the gap, and of course, it is more powerful than the Switch 1, so you're getting more comparable comparisons of games running on the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. And really, that should be the most important thing. That should be the thing that people are hanging their hat on. Yes, it's not going to be as good with all the bells and whistles of the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X version of the game, but it's still a very comparable version that you can also play on the go. It's just honestly weirdo behavior to me. It really, truly is to see these individuals, some of them being in their 40s and some of them being in like their 50s, and like they're just trying to convince people, oh, it's just as good as the PlayStation 5. It's just as good, even though we know from a technical perspective, from a raw specification perspective, that yes, it's a little bit behind the PlayStation 5. We know that there are ways to sort of make that up, and I'm sure as the console generation goes on, there will be instances of third-party games that maybe run exactly the same on the Switch 2 that they do on something like the PlayStation 5. I do not doubt that whatsoever. I think the Switch 2 is a very capable system that I am excited to play, but I also think there are going to be instances where the games don't run as good or have half the frame rate or have less resolution than a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X version of the game. Does that mean that the Switch 2 version is bad? No, like, games are a subjective thing. I have played worse versions of games on the Switch 1 and still enjoyed them immensely. Do you know that I played The Outer Worlds to completion on the Nintendo Switch 1 instead of playing it on something where it actually looked and played a lot better? But I wanted to review it. People play different things to have different experiences. People play different things on the console that they have. But when you're an adult, I really don't think you should be just harking on one console all the time, because you could get whatever you want. You could play wherever you want, and your preference doesn't necessarily mean that it is the perfect option for every single individual. People are all different. People are all unique. And it really, This is what I say. I hate communities. I hate community. Like whenever you hear the retro gaming community, the IWC, the internet wrestling community, this, that, and the other, because the parallels between things like video game communities and wrestling communities are very tribalistic. At least with the NBA community, because really there's only 3 communities that I kind of dip my toes in. At least with the NBA community, there's a reason to be tribalistic. You're not a fan of the I mean, you probably are a fan of the NBA, but you have a team. The team is what you kind of associate. You have a favorite team, so you connect with other like-minded individuals, but you don't really, veer off the path or anything like that unless you're playing against the other team. But this is a completely different situation with things like video games and wrestling, where people just have their favorite company and they act like, I can only play games on this console. I can only watch this company because they're my favorite. And it's like, bro, free your mind and the rest will follow. Anyways, guys, this is just my opinion on this subject matter. I'm sure there will be people that disagree with me, and that's cool. Like, you don't have to agree with me on this. I just think it's kind of weirdo behavior, and I think people just need to chill out a little bit. This is video games, a child's medium, that we just never gave up on, and we still love and we still enjoy. So, enjoy it, but I don't know, man. I don't know. It's just bizarre behavior to me. It's just very bizarre. Let me know what you think of it in the comments section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. Do you think that the Switch 2 is just as good as the PlayStation 5 in terms of visuals and resolution? I don't know, maybe you're blind, maybe missing an eye or something like that. You're cross-eyed, maybe that would be the case as to why. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. Like I said, if you want to watch that 37 or so minutes of Cyberpunk 2077 footage running on the Switch 2, I have a link in the description box down below. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.